We've called this press briefing today because we have additional information regarding the Allenstown, New Hampshire murder case.
This case, I don't know what to call it, but it was really a 1 in a million chance. I don't know if it was meant to be or if it's just a happenstance, but it was certainly not something that was foreseen by anyone.
Based on DNA testing and genealogical research, we've identified 3 of the Allenstown murder victims.
And now, with the use of genetic genealogy for law enforcement purposes, I think we've seen the next big breakthrough.
Genetic genealogy.
Genetic genealogy.
Genetic genealogy.
Thanks to the rise in personal genetic testing kits, the big break has led to an arrest in an infamous cold case.
Law enforcement agencies used the technique in at least
43 cases nationwide.
This is the most significant happening in criminal investigations in decades.
The promise is real and the technology cutting edge, but today's use of DNA science in genealogy research to solve crimes arose out of a tangled cross-country police investigation sparked by a curious telephone call made nearly 20 years ago.
In September 2002, a friend contacted our sheriff's dispatch to report that her friend Unsung had been missing. The deputy went out to the residence and contacted Unsung Jun's common-law husband, a gentleman by the name of Lawrence William Vanner.
Vanner acted suspiciously, and police brought him in for questioning.
You're not my priest. No. And you're not my doctor, but I'm just not going to say any more about Unsung or myself right now.
Maybe she hurt herself, and you're concerned about that getting out, that she's harmed herself.
No.
Vanner was a complete enigma.
There was no driver's license, there was no criminal history, and that's really unusual. That's like a ghost person.
On the ride to the Records Bureau for fingerprinting, Detective Grunheid struck up a conversation in the back seat.
Whenever you're interviewing somebody, you always want to try to find some sort of common thread. And I said something that, where'd you grow up? And all of a sudden he stopped and he looked at me. He had these bright, piercing blue eyes. And he kind of leaned in a little bit and he said, "That's none of your damn business."
All right, Larry, your prints came back. You know your other name, right?
Curtis or Gerald or Jerry or whatever name you're going by this week.
Curtis Kimball.
Curtis Kimball.
Curtis Kimball. That's how his fingerprints identified him. He jumped parole and had been on the run for 12 years. Grunheid went back to search Jun's house.
My partner and I went around to the garage. My partner took a few steps in, and he told me, "You need to come in here and take a look at this."
Inside was an enormous mound of cat litter. Scraping some of it aside revealed a human foot, with the flip-flop still on it. Unsung Jun was no longer missing. Vanner, charged with Jun's murder, was soon connected to another alias, Gordon Jensen. Jensen had abandoned a 5-year-old girl named Lisa, believed to be his daughter, 16 years earlier at a Northern California RV park. Grunheid tracked down information about Lisa, now an adult, and a DNA test revealed that Lisa wasn't his daughter after all.
I'm reading all through this, and my mind is going, where did he get this girl?
Investigators do not know her identity, and so Lisa becomes a sort of living Jane Doe.
And because of all his aliases, police had no idea who the man really was.
It became a quest of mine to try to identify her and identify him.
It was 1985, and there were a group of kids who lived in the Brook Gardens trailer park. And they were basically playing hide and seek. And they found a barrel. They didn't realize what they had actually found until later that fall when a hunter came across the same barrel.
was on routine patrol. I was dispatched to the area of Bearbrook Gardens number 1, and that's when I found a body that was decomposed, and it was dismembered.
There are human remains of 2 people, one an adult female, the other is a female child.
But the case went cold until 2000, when a state trooper stumbled upon a second barrel just 100 yards away from the first one.
In the second barrel were the remains of 2 more victims. These were both young girls. They had been out there just as long as the victims in the first barrel.
In 1985, DNA wasn't scientifically accepted in law enforcement. We didn't even have computers. My report was done on an IBM electric typewriter with carbon paper.
Crime scene DNA technology burst into use shortly after the first barrel was found.
Today, police can get what they call a DNA fingerprint.
But in this case, the bodies had deteriorated so badly, the samples were useless for DNA forensics of the time.
When you don't have the identity of the victims, it's almost impossible to learn anything about who might have killed them.
Your DNA plays a big part in defining who you are.
But by 2015, DNA testing had become mainstream.
It can even unlock family mysteries from your distant past.
And Lisa, the girl who had been abandoned at the California trailer park years earlier, still didn't know who she was. But she had an idea. Was there a way to use the genealogy test that had become so popular to find her own family? So police reached out to Barbara Rae-Venter, an expert in helping adoptees find their birth parents.
I'd never worked on a Jane Doe case like this before. She's the ultimate test of how this technique works because we quite literally knew nothing about her.
Lisa submitted her DNA, and Rae-Venter and her team began constructing her family tree.
She had 2 fairly close matches. One was on Ancestry, and then she had another match on 23andMe. We know from matching DNA that one of Lisa's parents has to be a first cousin once removed to the matches.
The team then used public records to build out the family trees of those matches, while police asked the newly ID'd relatives if they would submit to a DNA test to see if they were even more closely related to Lisa. The case would become a proof of concept for law enforcement.
It took upwards of 10,000 hours to do this, but eventually they did narrow down Lisa's family tree to a family in New Hampshire.
In July of 2016, Rae-Venter and police felt they finally could tell Lisa who she was. Her name was Dawn Bowden, and as an infant, she and her mother Denise had gone missing from Manchester, New Hampshire.
One Thanksgiving, Denise's family comes over to visit and she's gone. The house is empty, and that was the last that they had seen of her. And at the time, she had a boyfriend who was going by the name Bob Evans.
So who the heck is Bob Evans?
To answer that question, New Hampshire authorities turned to a photo sent to them by police in California.
They sent a picture of the guy who had been Lisa's abductor, who had a whole string of aliases. You used the name Rae-Venter.
The state police came to my house. They took a picture, threw it on the table, and said, "You know who that is?" And I said, "Yeah, it's Bob Evans."
Mark Gelinas knew this man. They worked at the same New Hampshire mill in the 80s. After 30 years, authorities announced they knew who the Bear Brook murderer was, after DNA tests revealed that his biological daughter had been inside one of the barrels.
In New Hampshire, he was known as Bob Evans.
He's a serial killer. Unsung Jun, the Bear Brook victims. Lisa's kidnapping, he was the same guy. And what happened to Denise? We don't know.
Bob Evans never answered for his Bear Brook victims. He died in prison in 2010 after pleading guilty to the murder of Unsung Jun.
But the investigation into the identity of Lisa kicks off this, revolution into how we use DNA to solve crimes.
After Bear Brook, detectives in California wondered if the same DNA techniques could be used to help solve one of America's biggest mysteries.
The Golden State Killer.
The Golden State Killer.
Violent and ruthless rampage started in the 1970s.
I was pretty confident that we could solve it. It's exactly the same technique.
Commercial genealogy websites like Ancestry.com and 23andMe say it's their policy not to allow law enforcement to search their databases. So Rae-Venter used GEDmatch, an open-source database where people voluntarily upload their DNA profiles. 63 days later, she had a match.
Tonight, a 4-decade-old search for one of history's most infamous serial killers may be over. The elusive Golden State Killer.
Golden State Killer changed everything.
After that arrest in 2018, genetic genealogist C.C. Moore began working with law enforcement. After GEDmatch clarified its policy,
That meant people now knew and had the choice to have their DNA used in this way or not. I had received dozens and dozens of inquiries asking if I could use my techniques.
In the past year alone, Moore and her team at Parabon Nanolabs have used genetic genealogy to unearth new information about more than 50 cold cases.
The suspect's DNA collected at the scene was used to identify his ancestors, which in turn led us to the identification of Talbot.
With detectives narrowing in on people based on the DNA of their genetic relatives, privacy concerns are growing.
Everyone wants to catch the bad guy. My question is, though, at what cost?
Delegate Sidnor with House Bill 30.
My DNA is my DNA, and my DNA will be my children's DNA and their children and their children's children. So when you allow governments to begin using these techniques, you're essentially creating a huge genealogical dragnet that even if I consented, my children, their children, their children's children, they never consented to.
In May 2019, GEDmatch changed its policy, so users have to opt in to allow for law enforcement searches.
Most people would agree that solving cold cases and identifying remains are worthy and noble causes, but you start talking about a big database full of everyone's DNA, I think people start to get a little nervous.
Today, an estimated 29 million people have added their DNA to the leading databases. And while those are private, people still continue to upload their profiles to publicly available databases.
Essentially, we're chasing after a genie that's already been let out of the bottle and trying to figure out how to contain it, how to regulate it.
In the Brook case, Rae-Venter used genetic genealogy to discover one final detail about the murderer.
In New Hampshire, he called himself Bob Evans. That man's real name was Terry Rasmussen.
And after an amateur genealogist heard Jason Moon report Rasmussen's identity in his podcast, she helped police identify the other 3 Brook victims. But Lisa's mother, Denise Bowden, remains missing. And no one knows how many other victims Rasmussen may have claimed.
I've always tried to live by the model that there's no defense against the truth. But sometimes it's hard to find out what the truth is.
Genetic genealogy raises really interesting questions about who owns genetic information. It's really hard to find analogies to it in other areas of science and the law because your DNA is simultaneously the most personal thing about you, but it's also shared amongst all of us.